Welcome, everyone, back to the podcast Conversations and Connections. I am your host, Sandy McGregor, and I am so excited to introduce to you today four incredible women that have done so many wonderful things in the world of writing, crossing so many different genres: mystery, romance, devotionals. And each one of these ladies are award-winning and best-selling in so many different ways. And it's so exciting. And I'm honored that you are here today to be able to share with the audience who you are and a little bit of your background, your faith story, and also, of course, because you just released this book, I'll Be Home, and I cannot wait to talk about how fabulous it is, and I couldn't put it down, and I can't wait for people to know a little bit about that just in time for Christmas as well. So welcome, ladies.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. It's absolutely a pleasure. So what I think we'll start with today is maybe we'll start with Melanie. So everybody, this is Melanie Stevenson. And so what Melanie will do, she's going to share a little bit about her background, a little bit of her faith story, and how she ended up falling into writing.
Sure. Well, as Sandy said, I'm Melanie Stevenson, and I was born in England. And when I was 5, my parents immigrated to Canada. And at one point they wanted to move back. So I began living with a family in Canada. And at that point became a Christian at 18. And I don't have time to tell you how, but it transformed my life. And of course, once Jesus is in it, he kind of permeates all that you do. And so I was always writing. Even when I was a little kid, I wrote my first novel when I was 12 and read it to my girlfriends as they awaited each chapter. That's how I had that love. I always wrote poetry. And so anyway, I homeschooled my kids it ended up being about 19 years. And I wrote during that time a lot of devotionals and kind of like quietly by myself. And I wrote a novel, but I just sat on it because I knew that I didn't feel like I could do everything well. There were other parts of my life, running around, helping at church, all of that. So I waited. And when my youngest, who's now 16, she went to school in grade 5, I then started with properly writing and published my first book, One More Tomorrow, and 2 months later, my first devotional, Soul Focus. And now here we are with this amazing group of ladies with I'll Be Home. So
that's amazing. Well, thank you. I know that we had a chance to meet. I don't even know actually when we first met, but it would have been probably through the homeschooling years and different connections that we had. So it's lovely to have known you for so long, and I just love your writing, and I'm just so proud of you. I just love it.
Oh, thank you.
So let's go to Darlene. Darlene Turner, welcome to the podcast. Can you share a little bit about you and your faith story and a little bit of your writing journey?
Well, thanks so much for having us. I was born actually in New Brunswick, so out east for those watching. And I was born into a Christian family. I went to church, did everything, went to church. And when I was 7, I became a Christian. And then, you grow up and then you start. For me, during high school, I kind of just went through the motions, because your family did and that type of thing. But in college, God really spoke to my heart and grabbed a hold of it. And I rededicated my life at that point. So that's how, my faith journey.
Mm-hmm.
Then I moved to Nova Scotia. And in Nova Scotia, I started a creative writing class. I should back up a little bit here. When I first started reading, when I was young, I read Nancy Drew, and I fell in love with Nancy Drew, and that's how I fell in love with mystery.
Yeah.
And I even wrote my own Mindy Dobson series.
Well, right.
I started to, and then I, kind of grew up and set it aside. So when I was in Halifax, I took a creative writing class. And in that class, she asked us to write a short story. I started on this short story, and it was kind of a modern day Nancy Drew. Well, the story kind of grew and grew and grew and grew, and I couldn't end it without ruining it. So I ended it with, if you want to know what happens, you have to wait for the novel. So that was actually my very first book that I wrote. Now it's not published. But I am now writing for Love Inspired Suspense. I write romantic suspense. They are the faith division of Harlequin, and I'm currently working on my 14th book.
Wow.
So I'm feeling very blessed. God is good. And I pray that He will continue to use my words for His glory and His honor. So, yeah.
I love that so much, Darlene. Thanks so much for sharing. I too can relate to the Nancy Drew. My first journal from when I can remember was a Nancy Drew journal, but it had a lock on it, which would be totally Nancy Drew, right? Because secrets of everything, right? So that was like one of the early inspirations for me in journaling was writing. In fact, my mom, she said to me the other day, she's like, "Okay, when did you really start journaling? Because sometimes your parents just don't know the early beginnings of lots of different things, right?" I said, "Well, I just put all my secrets in it. I said, I just wanted to write all the things that are on my mind and heart that I didn't want other people to know." And then there was a key. So I think mystery it's ingrained in, I think, a lot of our generation. So I'm very glad to see you taking the torch and continuing because it's a great, great genre to read. So thanks, Darlene. Elena Schmertek, thank you. Schmerchek, right? Smirchek.
You got it right.
Good. Welcome here today too. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having us, Sandy. This is such a pleasure and such a privilege. So
yeah,
we appreciate the time, and hopefully your listeners will like what we have to share.
Oh, they will for sure. I'm very excited to share it with everybody. So let's hear a little bit about you, Helena, your faith story, and again, your kind of your journey toward writing.
For sure. I'll try to make it short because whoever knows me knows I can talk for hours.
That's okay.
A very quick review. I was born in Czech Republic way back when, and in 1986 we entered a refugee camp in Austria, and that is where we met a missionary team. Then it was called International Teams, and they just were such lovely people, and they adopted us as a family, and we loved it. And my whole entire Christian journey started with the shoebox, and Christmas is coming. So if anyone of your listeners is, thinking about contributing to the shoeboxes that are being sent out at Christmas time all over the world. So I'm one of those people who received a shoebox, and that's how I found Jesus. So
wow.
Absolutely, if you have an opportunity to do that, please do so. It's super important, and you never know what God will use.
Yeah.
And then we're going to fast forward to 1999. I have met Lorna Duick of the 100 Street, and we ended up having lunch. And she is such an amazing encourager to women. And she basically asked me, what is it that I wanted to do? And I was a mom. I think I had a 2- and 4-year-old at that time. And I said, well, I always wanted to write, but I mean, I never went to university. How am I going to do this? And she said, well, what I did, she does actually have a degree in journalism, but she said, why don't you go to the library and find a book on how to write an article? So I did that. And within the next 2 years, I proceeded to sell about, close to 100. I was like really busy writing, and I thought it was easy because nobody told me it's hard. And then I met my mentor 2 years later, and he's Murphy. He's still my mentor today. He's over 90 years old. He's an amazing man.
Wow.
He asked me, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I would like to write fiction. And then he said, well, then send me 3 pages. I'll edit them for you and send them back. And then we're going to rewrite them. And as long as it takes, till you get it. So that was a bit of a journey. He is a very strict mentor, but very lovely man. And so that's how I started.
Wow. That's wonderful. That's great. I'm sure there's so many more things that we could fill in the gaps, but that's a great way to begin to come to know you. So thanks so much. So Sarah, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I was born into a Christian family too, and generational, my grandparents on both sides. And I was very, very blessed. My one grandmother was my Sunday school teacher and led me to Jesus when I was probably 4 or 5. And I just sort of thought that's what it was like for everybody. And then when I got to my teens and we started going to youth events, and they would bring in all these speakers with these amazing testimonies, I started to, I was just blown away by them. And in some ways I thought, wow, I wish I had a testimony like that. But I've come to see over the years, we all have a testimony, whether we come to Jesus at 40 or 100, we are all sinners saved by grace. And I'm just deeply grateful every day for Jesus and for those in my life that share that faith, and it's such a supportive community, especially these 4 women that we share a lot of our faith journey together, and it's really special. And I have always known I wanted to write. I have vivid memories. So when I was growing up, we moved a lot, probably every couple of years, which is something my husband and I have continued to do for various reasons. But the first thing I would do when we'd move is head for the library. As soon as I could find the library, I knew I was home. So I basically camped out at the library and read voraciously. But I have a couple of vivid memories of when I was 8 or 9. The first one was we went on a school trip, and we had to do a write-up about the trip after, and mine was chosen to go in the school newsletter. And I can still remember to this day how that felt, seeing my words in print and seeing people read it. And I thought, I want to do that. So, I did know right from the beginning it was hard, though, Helen. Nobody had to tell me. I wrote a book. It took me a number of years to actually sit down and write, because it's kind of daunting to start a book. But when I did, I thought it was pretty good, and then I took it to an editor and found it was not very good. But so I worked on that book for about 5 years before it won a publishing contest. But I was hooked, and I didn't consciously set out to write romantic suspense, but that's always been my favorite genre to read, and so that's what came out when I started writing. I love that edge of your seat suspense, but I'm also a sucker for love stories, so you'll always find equal amounts of both in my book.
That's great. That's so great. Actually, the fact that you just talked about the idea of the first publication, I would love it if each one of you would talk about kind of that initial dream and hope of that first publication. And then when it did actually happen, maybe just talk about that moment, because I know there's a lot of people that will be listening that do have that desire to publish. And I know I was going to ask you more of this later on to encourage other people, which we can talk about more later, but it's a hard journey. And it's almost like this dream that you think is never going to happen. And I know a lot of people that have said, I have this secret idea and all these ideas, and I want to do this. And so what would you say maybe right now about that part of your journey of that first publication? And kind of what was that experience like for you? Maybe we'll start with Melanie.
Okay. Well, I wrote One More Tomorrow in my early 30s when my kids were little, and my husband would take the kids one night a week just out of the house. And that was my writing night. And I would go down to the little coffee shop. I'd get my giant latte and a sandwich. Then I would hole away into my little tiny closet-like office at the back of the house and write. And because the kids were little, it was like having this quiet home and quiet time to do this was amazing. So I wrote this whole book during that time. Sometimes I would, a couple times I stayed up all night writing, which I know probably all of us here have maybe done at one time or another. But anyway, I got it done, but then I sat on it for a number of years until I don't know how I came across, there was the Word Awards, Word Alive? Anyway, they put a publishing contest, and I was like, I've got this manuscript. I'm just sitting on it. I should just throw it out there. And so, of course, in fear and trepidation, I put it in the contest, and it was shortlisted. And so another year went by, and I finally said, okay, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and publish it. And it ended up that I had met with Sarah for coffee because I was starstruck by her because she had written all these books. And anyway, she happened to tell me that she was going to be one of the editors for Word Alive at that time. And so I was like, oh my goodness, if you could be my editor. So actually, Sarah ended up editing my first 2 books.
Oh, wow.
Quite amazing and wonderful because she's so nice and kind. Anyway, I could go on and on, but suffice to say, I actually won Best Romance for One More Tomorrow in the Word Awards, and then Best New Canadian Author that year. So that was really encouraging. Really, I guess it was a bit of an affirmation for me, which of course we all know as writers, doesn't matter probably how long you've been doing it. You'll always need some kind of gentle affirmation as you go along, because it's hard to feel like what you're writing is good all the time. Yeah. So anyway, I think that was pretty much how I got into it. I don't know if I fully answered the question.
Oh, no, that was great. That was wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. That will be very helpful. I think a lot of moms out there would be like, yeah, I can't do this. I've got too much going on. I have to go grocery shopping, cook and clean and carpool. But you know what? When you mentioned that, carving out that time, that's the only way you can do it. You got to look for those times. So, and being in kind of like tandem with your husband too, just so you're working together. Yeah. That's great. Thanks, Melanie, for sharing. How about you, Darlene?
Actually, my writing journey took like 10 to 12 years before I was actually published. Okay. I took some courses through the Jerry B. Jenkins class. And through that class, I refined that story that I was telling you about earlier and entered it into some contests, and actually won the Daphne Award one year, which was really cool, which encouraged me to keep going, because I had started pitching it to publishers and agents, and I would get interest, but then they would decline me or reject me. Reject me. That's a harsh word, isn't it?
That's a very harsh word, but it happens.
Yeah, it does. So I decided to start and write another book, which eventually also won an award, the Genesis Award with ACFW, which is American Christian Fiction Writers. And that garnered the attention of my agent, who's Tamala Hancock Murray is now my agent. And she encouraged me to try writing for Love Inspired Suspense. And I went, okay, I'll try again. Because I had originally, one of my manuscripts was rejected by them. I turned it into a full book, which won the Genesis Award. So I thought, okay, I'll try it again. Well, that was the book that actually the same editor bought.
Really?
Yes. Yeah. And she's still my editor today, which is amazing.
Oh, that's great.
But yeah, so I remember getting that phone call from my agent, because, you know, she will call you with the good news. Usually if it's not so good, she'll email you instead. So when I saw her name, I grabbed the phone and was talking to her. And then I kind of, after I got off the phone, I did a little happy dance after that. But the writers out there who are going through that journey, there were so many times that I wanted to quit. And I rejection after rejection, and I would be this close to quitting, and then all of a sudden God would use somebody. Either I would final in a contest, or someone would email me and say, you know, I just read your blog. It really inspired me and encouraged me, and keep writing and that type of thing. So I didn't quit.
Wow.
And I'm so glad I didn't. So
we are too.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was my writing journey.
That's great. No, I appreciate you sharing that. Thank you. Because each journey is so unique and so personal. And I think it's an inspiration for those watching today that your journey is your journey. And if it's on your heart, God's going to do something with it. And it's that there's a lot of tenacity in this room. There's a lot of fervor, and that's what I feel like you're expressing. And I think that's really great for others to hear that. How about you, Helena? What about the journey a little bit?
Well, Sandy, you're absolutely right. God is going to do something. And my journey was a little different. I took actually the same course as Darlene did. And I think that's why we have met.
Yes. Colorado Springs, right. Believe it or not.
No kidding.
And
that's great.
An hour apart. So it's kind of funny how that worked. But so yeah, I was working with my mentor, and I started going to conferences, which was a huge thing, and then pitching to editors. And I always had interest, but you know, as my dear friend said, they're so interested when you talk to them, but then later it just becomes, well, you know, maybe it's not the right fit.
Yeah.
This was taking quite a while. I even had a really great agent, and I was so happy when he signed me on. I thought, wow, now I made it. And then 4 years later, I still haven't. And so he actually was kind. We sat down and he said, you know what, have you considered indie publishing? And this is when indie was just gaining popularity. And I wasn't really sure. I always thought, you know, my writing needs to be good enough for somebody to buy it. That was my initial kind of train of thought. And I thought about what he said, and I said, you know what? I'll give that a try. Because at that point, I think I had like 5 manuscripts, and ideas just keep coming, and I keep writing, and I'm thinking these don't serve any purpose if they sit on my hard drive and nobody reads them. So the whole point is to tell these stories to people and, offer them either entertainment or escape, or maybe a little bit of education, some comfort. So I just plunged into indie publishing, and I had to learn everything and anything from the scratch.
Wow.
It's a bit of an uphill, but I absolutely love it. And there's more and more credence given to indie publishing. There's a lot of authors, and Amazon is a giant. And I always say, there are countries that I'll never travel to, but people do have access to the internet. They have access to Amazon, and our stories can travel. And that's what the purpose is right now.
That's neat. That's exciting. I love hearing how each journey is so unique. It's so great. How about you, Sarah?
Yeah, so you hear about these people who write a book and get picked up by a big author and it takes off, or a big publisher, and it takes off. That is definitely not my journey. I feel like I've kind of cobbled together a career in various ways. My very first book did win the Word of Life Publishing Award, so it came out in 2011, and I sort of had expectations at that point that I would just be this big famous star now. That did not happen either. But so it was a few more years before I got an agent, and a very small publishing company, mother and daughter company, picked up my first series. They were wonderful to work with, but they folded after a while. Another company picked them up. So I was with them for a while, and then I went to a slightly bigger company. So just kind of putting out books, and then I'd always had indie publishing in the back of my mind too, but I don't know if I ever would have done it, except I was approached by a group of authors called the Mosaic Collection, which is 12 indie authors, and we formed a collection, and we put out books, and then we support each other as our books come out. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. So I'm kind of a hybrid author. I have some traditionally published and some indie published. I now have a new agent, Lynette Eason, which I'm very excited about, and I've just signed with a bigger company. So I've, it's been kind of a roundabout journey. Still not any kind of, best-selling author, but I do constantly remind myself that God has given me this gift, and He told me to do this, and He has a plan. I've heard Him say to me, "I have a plan for you," and I think I know He said that to every writer. That He has a plan for every writer writing for Him. And so I trust when I put out a book, if I can do on my part and make it as excellent as I can and promote it as much as I can, numbers don't matter. I just trust that God will get it into the hands of the people that He wants to read it, and then it's a success.
Yeah, that is really truly the success part, that it is in God's hands, and He knows what He wants to do with it. And if He's giving you that idea and He's going to birth it, it's going to be in that right library, that right room, that right bookstore for that right person to pick up at that right moment and then read and pass along. That's what I love about books. You just got to pass them on. I've told so many people about this book. So my mom's going to get it first, because I said, I have to finish this first and do the interview, and then you can have it.
Well, thanks for passing it along. We love when people do that.
Yeah, well, they'll understand why when they read it. But let's talk a little bit about how the four of you became the Fab Four, and how this book came to be, I'll Be Home. And it is 4 contemporary Christmas novellas. And you've got faith, you've got love, you've got mystery. It is just divine. It is amazing. Each book. And you know what I love too, is that sometimes people look at a book this thick and they think, I can't read that entire book. But the beauty of this is that you've got the 4 short ones. So you can put it down and then come back to it, read the next one, or you can read them all at once. But it's incredible. And you did such a beautiful job, ladies. Each one of your skills were so beautifully woven through your stories, and just jumping from one to the next was just like, I didn't know it could get any better. Like this one was incredible. I'm like, well, this was incredible. So I'm just so proud of all of you for doing this. And I really hope that this takes off and people can be inspired and pick this copy up for Christmas. So I'm not sure who wants to go first, but let's talk a little bit about how this came to be. How did you begin this journey of Fab Four?
Well, thank you for your kind words there. Well, I volunteered to just start, and then we're going to probably at will take over. But I can't say enough about the ladies here, because we really feel like God just put us together at the right time. And we'll tell you why. But as I said, knew Sarah because she had edited my first 2 books. And then we were in a writing group together. Then I had decided to, I had taken this word, fearless, I think it was in 2020. And Sarah put together a retreat, a Christian writers retreat. And the deadline passed. And the next morning I called her and I said, or I texted her or something. And I just said, oh, is there still room by any chance? And she's like, yeah, I would love you to come. Well, I went to that, pushing myself, and I met Helen there. And Helen, you'll start to understand, is this very vivacious personality, and she has so much creativity and ideas. And so she was like, oh, you live in Cambridge, I live in Brantford, we should do something. And then by the time the new year came, suddenly, I don't know who, I think probably Sarah, asked me if I would come to a retreat with these guys. And I was like so honored. I was like, what are they asking me for? This is crazy. I don't belong there. But they invited me, and I was like nervous. Again, I was trying to be fearless. And we rented an Airbnb. There was the 4 of us and 2 other ladies. But somehow we just gelled. And I'm going to let someone else take it from there.
Yeah, so I mean, we did, and it was clearly a God thing, because there was just we often, whenever we go to a retreat or conference or something with with other Christian writers, there's an instant bond and connection, right? You shared faith and your shared passion for writing, but this was just next level, the 4 of us. And so we have it's really morphed into this thing that, we talk every day on Facebook Messenger, long chats every day, and we share life together, and we share our faith, and we pray for each other, and we try to meet in person every month or so, if it's for a writing day or for a retreat at a cottage. And those times have just been so powerful, because we not only get together and write and catch up on our lives, but we always make time to pray together. And those have just become powerful prayer times. We were recently up at Mel's Cottage up north, and we were sitting out on the dock having this prayer time, and the wind was just kind of swirling around us, and it just you just feel the presence of the Holy Spirit. And it's been like that from day one. So it's more than just sharing our writing, we are sharing our lives together, really, all grief.
Yeah, I really love that. You can sense that when you get to the end of the story and you're in the epilogue, and then you talk a little bit about just who you're thanking and the meaning behind the book. And it comes out in each one of your, in the words that you share about the journey. And it's really beautiful. And I think this is so inspiring for others to realize that as much of a lonely life as writing can be, as you all can completely understand, if you don't get into community, you're not going to flourish. And I think your best creativity is coming from other people. And then you're listening to one another, and you're sharing with one another. And that is exactly what I see happening in this book. And I have a sneaky suspicion that there might be more coming from you guys. Maybe.
It's a mystery.
The mystery. I just have a feeling. I'm thinking this has to be just the beginning.
Well, we won't spoil anything, but one of the things I wanted to add is that we've gone on these guys have invited me on to start. I've never been to a writers conference in the States. And so they asked me to come, and I was like, oh my goodness, like that's a lot, like a big Christian writers conference in the States. But it was so lovely because they had gone before me already. They knew the ropes. I was like ushered in with them, and I wasn't left alone, and they knew what to say, to tell me, to coach me. I could, they would celebrate with me. We would celebrate with each other. But on the way there and on the way home, we would talk about our projects like only writers can. And so we would give input, like brainstorming sessions. And it was just so beautiful to say, okay, here's my idea. And then everybody, and I had never had that before. I was always just coming up with ideas quietly by myself. And now we were throwing ideas at, and everybody's brain was so different. And everybody comes up with something so cool and different, that it was marvelous how we could sort through a whole, story in a ride home kind of thing. So we actually did come up with the idea for next year for our anthology, which I'm not sure if we're going to say anything about that, but
I can have you back on and you can share it later. We'll keep people in suspense. Well, I know that time is slipping by, but before we do have to close off the podcast, I really want to hear a little snippet from each one of you of just how you can inspire somebody today that might be trying to embark on this writing journey. I know you've already given so much inspiration, but maybe there's a little nugget or something else that you can share that somebody can take away with them. And so somebody, whoever wants to jump in.
I would say definitely don't give up. And don't give up. Don't compare yourself to your journey to another author's journey, because as we mentioned, they're all different. I would also say reach out to any author that you know, because we are here to help each other. And that's what I love about the authors in our Christian community. They love each other and they want to help. So that's what I would encourage.
I love that. Thanks, Darlene.
Darlene stole my answers. Yeah. Sorry. She stole my answers basically, because early on someone said to me, if you believe in your story, don't give up on it. And that has always stuck in my head, because it is really easy to give up. And there's still days where I think, what am I doing this for? Why am I doing this to myself? But just don't give up, particularly if you believe that God has given you a story, because there's a purpose for it, and you just need to wait for the right time and the right person. And also do seek out community, because that is one of the truly beautiful things about being a Christian author, is the Christian writing community is a beautiful thing, very supportive and encouraging. We're not competing with each other.
Amazing.
We just want to lift each other up, and we're all on the same team.
That's great. That's really great.
Community.
I would say think big, because our God is big. And what we do is not just for ourselves. And if you do have an idea and you're not sure how to start, you can reach out. Feel free. There is resources online. There is people who will gladly talk to you, help you to kind of get your toes wet and just get your first draft out, even if it's first few pages. And Fab4 is kind of our funny name for ourselves, but we're not just in it for ourselves. Melanie is organizing Create. We have been organizing little book markets and book launches, so that we invite the community and we kind of open it up. We have lost such a huge number of Christian bookstores, and there is such a big void, and we all feel it. And the big bookstores, they have a section on religion, but you never know what you're going to find.
No.
So we're trying to kind of work within our own circles of influence, our communities, our churches, our neighborhoods, invite people, share the stories, because that is the reason why we write. I mean, it is to not write for, our own fame and glory. It's not about that.
Amen.
And those who are on Christian publishing, they know there's not much of that either. But we write for God, honestly, and we cannot really take the credit for the stories. I believe they come through the Holy Spirit, and we're just looking for the right person to read the right story and help them find Jesus, or deepen that relationship with God, or maybe give them hope in a situation they might be faced with.
Yeah. Well, we've got 1 minute, Melanie.
Well, the big thing I've been saying lately to myself and telling other people is it's not about you. And I think it applies to everything in our lives, but also the writing. It's not about us. We're just I don't know if the right word, it's the conduit, like God, like Helen was saying, is working through us. And we just have to lay it down, everything we expected it to be, everything it is and isn't. It's like an offering. It's not about us. We're just going to glorify God. So I would say if that's your higher purpose for doing it, it's a lot less difficult to get discouraged, because that this is more, is bigger than you.
Yeah, that's amazing. Ladies, thank you so much for being here today. This was a gift for me and for the listeners, and I can't wait to have you back and talk about more and what's to come. So thank you, ladies, so much for sharing your journey.